And so Nino goes out. Niko comes in. Like I said, where else on a Thursday can you go from Houston to Lima to Seattle? Answer, one place. And Niko knows where that is because it's right here where we can talk stuff and go Thursdays with Niko. What cup of coffee are you on, sir?
This is number one, and I had to get it on the go because it was a bit of a quick morning. But hey, that's how it happens sometimes. Excited. I was up late watching some CONCACAF games. All in all, trying to get you as much as I could. Trying to see where some of these MLS teams are because I'm still a little bit behind and I have not put out my power rankings. So I'm trying to use that a little bit. So we will get those out this weekend. But hey, excited to be on in the best show in the East Coast. East Coast all around, baby, all around. Excited to be on.
Love your promos as always, my friend. All right, so let's start with the CONCACAF Hemispheric Extravaganza. We got into it a little bit with Glenn Davis. We talked about Messi and friends and single-digit temperatures in Kansas City, and everybody wondering, oh, is he going to play? It's too cold. It's too cold. He can't play. One bet. He gets the goal on the board, and Messi and friends get the big road goal. You were paying attention to a match in particular. What are your takeaways now that you've had a couple of hours to sleep on it with what Seattle was up to in CONCACAF Champions Cup last night?
Look, I thought it was a solid performance by a team that is clearly on their season debut in a visitor type of quality game. Never easy to travel, uh, regardless of how people may look at this competition. It doesn't matter what team you're facing. You got a big target on your back anytime that you're in MLS squad. So the teams are always going to play above their own level, above their own weight. And I thought Seattle, look, they started with about 10 minutes of really good soccer. They get an early goal in the third minute by Paul Arriola that, has been outstanding during the preseason. I thought he had a really good game in this one. But then things kind of go out of whack. I mean, there is a good response by Antigua. They get very physical. I feel like Seattle loses possession. They are not as precise with the ball. I think Pedro de la Vega struggled to start off the game as well, between decision making to just not being sharp on the ball, holding it too long. He was playing on the right side, and the way they put it out there on paper, it was a 4-2-3-1. So back to their setup or the default setup from last season. And I think what ended up happening is that when Brian figured out that Pedro was struggling as bad as he was on the right side, I think he goes back more to that 3-4-2-1 that they've been working on in the preseason. Pedro goes to the left side, and things get a little bit better. Even while playing badly, they get a second goal. Pedro de la Vega, he was, I think, the most incisive player. He was the one that was pushing the most. Maybe not perfect, maybe not as effective as he could have been, but he was making it really difficult for Antigua to just hold him back. And he gets a second goal. Tries a shot outside of the 18. Big boom, gets a deflection, back of the net. Again, Antigua is able to press, is able to push. All in all, my conclusion was that the 3-1 score line, as Coach Tapia, the Antigua coach, said, was unexpected and unfair if you look at the 90 minutes. Because in the first half, I feel like Antigua was a little bit better. They do get an equalizer in that first 45 minutes. They take advantage of a Sounders team that is committing a lot of numbers forward, very aggressive, and off of a throw-in, they get a counter. They get behind the back line. It's a foot race. Romario da Silva, Antigua player, just beats everybody on the left side, crosses it, and Oscar Santis, who's Antigua's best player, puts it away for the equalizer. So things to figure out for Seattle, but all in all, I think it was a solid performance because you were able to figure it out when things didn't work out. You didn't lose composure. You were able to get the goals. Um, and you saw some of the players that you wanted to see perform. I think Ferreira had a decent game. Georgie Manungo off the bench was fantastic. He almost gets an assist right off the bat with his first touch on the game when he comes on. Uh, Stefan Fried, whenever his number was called, he responded. Defensively, miscommunications. I think that there are concepts that they're trying out. That high press, man. When the high press doesn't get there, it's kind of like a blitz. If the blitz gets picked up, you're exposed in the back end, and that's what happened in Seattle yesterday. So something to figure out. But all in all, a solid performance.
One of the things that we haven't had the chance to talk about because news happens as much as we want news to happen when you and I are talking here on a Thursday morning. News happens on days when you and I are not talking, and we haven't had the chance to break down the Josh Atencio deal yet. And I wanted to have you kind of break down the 1.3 and the why and what you think Seattle is going to gain out of this, aside from, getting to breathe a little bit when it comes to your roster. What does the Josh Atencio deal do for Seattle, both on the field and off?
Yeah. Look, first of all, I think that the reason why Josh is moved is because the offer was too good to pass out, to pass on. I mean, it was 1.3 plus some additions that can essentially get you to 1.6. Seattle keeps a sell on clause. Uh, there were fillers put out there, in my opinion, because the team did get a lot of calls for Josh Atencio. I'm told that at least 4 teams were on the phone, really trying to get Josh to come to their squad. I know Colorado had prior interest in the player. There is a connection with Coach Little, Chris Little, who's part of the coaching staff there in Colorado, knows the player. Josh has family in Colorado as well, so I think that they really wanted the player. So the 1.3 million in GAM gives Seattle a lot of flexibility when it comes to the cap. People were asking if there was going to be a cash transfer or not. That just didn't benefit Seattle, because if you sell Obed Vargas, then there's a cap of 3 million this year, and you wouldn't be able to use all of it. So they do a good job by getting this GAM. It helps their cap in general, looking into the future and what they can actually add on. They open up a U22 spot as well. So there's a lot of things that give Seattle some flexibility, but mainly you give yourself all of those resources by moving on a player that wasn't going to get a lot of playtime. So it's a win-win for both player and club, right? The team tried to move him into a center back position because they feel like they had a lot of occupancy in that center midfield. Josh started off as a center back, prior to coming to the Sounders. I've said this 1,000 times. Roman Torres thought that he was going to be a top center back. He used to tell me about Atencio. Man, that guy's big. That guy can play. But he was more of a center midfielder. So they tried to move him back there. There was a bit of a learning curve. The coaching staff wasn't really sure if they were going to be able to, play him enough in that position. So they do right by the player as well, and they get him somewhere where he's going to be more of a cornerstone. He's going to play more minutes, and Seattle gets themselves a lot of GAM that in today's MLS is worth a lot. Those Garber bucks sometimes can really help you out when it comes to your books, and I think Seattle is hoping to get a big U22, maybe an additional player beyond that, and all of this just helps that situation.
And now, by the way, the transit from Seattle, and you can't fly directly into Tegucigalpa, Honduras. You have to fly into San Pedro Sula. It is 3,059 miles from Seattle to Tegucigalpa. For a person to hop on a flight, any individual, let's just say that you get a knock on the door. There's an envelope there, and it has something more than Garber bucks in it. Let's just say you wanted to fly from Seattle to Tegucigalpa to go catch the match. It's $2,332 per person on this particular airline to go 3,059 miles, turn around, come back, and now you're the late game on Saturday after playing Wednesday night in Honduras, and Charlotte comes to town. Congratulations. Welcome to match week 1, yeah?
Yeah, it's going to be tough, right? I mean, Seattle knew what they were getting into. The team flew back right away. They were trying to quickly get out of Guatemala. I even got a bit of a text because I added an additional question there at the presser, and they're like, "Man, we gotta go." So they were trying to get back on time. They gave one region day, and then they're off again, right? They're gonna practice on Friday, and then they're off to play in Charlotte, right? So I do expect a lot of rotation. This Seattle team has a lot of depth. I expect before this game, I thought maybe Obed Vargas and Christian were going to do another game, but Obed Vargas got hammered. Obed Vargas might have been the player that got hit, kicked, elbowed, shoulder, tackled the most in this entire game. So I expect them to get a little rest, and that's where the depth comes in. I think that in this game against Charlotte, Ryan Smetzer is probably very confident that JP and Danny Leyva can play those two pivots for him at holding mid position. I think that Georgie Manungu, who came in late and was outstanding, I think he'll get a start. I think he earned that. I think he's been really good. Paul Rothrock came in and played as a wingback for Paul Arriola. That's a position that I also think he could perform very well. So because of the depth of this team, I'm not really concerned. Albert Rusnak, who gets the third goal in this one late in the game, I think he'll get a start, of course, as well. So that's another rotational piece. So because of the depth, I think Seattle's going to be A-okay for that game back. Maybe a little sore, maybe some travel, maybe some, lack of sleep. But regardless of, I think you're going to see a really quality squad in the home opener here in Seattle. So going back to Albert Rusnak, a player that we had discussed, had some injuries, had some issues. Man, he looked really good. He practiced 2 full practices before that game in Antigua. Looked really good. So that's a positive for Seattle. That DP level talent, always important. Pedro de la Vega, ups and downs in this game. So that's exactly why you need that veteran presence at the cam position. So I think it definitely shifts things a little bit. So I think you're going to get a really good squad against Charlotte, no matter what. Charlotte's a tough team. They're a quality squad. They're going to come in and they're going to pressure. They're going to challenge this Seattle team. But at home, with how good they've been playing, I could probably go for a tie in that one, and that'll be a good result for the Sounders. But Charlotte's a good team, man. I would not look beyond Charlotte.
Juice boxes, for the record, Seattle favored at a -135. Your draw +265 in the composite. Charlotte to win outright is a +361. So those are the numbers with your juice boxes for Seattle and Charlotte.
Yeah, no, that draw's pretty safe. I really do expect Seattle to not be as aggressive as they were in Antigua. Again, I feel like they got exposed a couple of times on those flanks whenever their fullbacks were a little too high or the wingbacks were a little too high. They also did some work there at the end to make their efforts pay off, because now Wednesday game will come, right? Because Antigua will fly to Seattle Sunday. By the way, that's another piece of news. There were some reports that they had some issues with their visas and potentially we're going to miss some players after the game. Coach Tapia mentioned that all of that has been resolved. Every player has their visas and they'll all be coming in on Sunday. So now that you get that extra 2 goals, I think Brian is going to have a better idea on how he wants to manage that Charlotte game and then eventually that Wednesday game against Antigua. So all in all, that additional goal in the 94th minute in Guatemala, I think really helped out Brian and being able to more calmly decide how he's going to play out Charlotte and Antigua on Wednesday.
It is getting ready for match week number 1, and the match week number 1 is the meat and the sandwich for Seattle because of the CONCACAF competition. Last season, Seattle finished 4th, 57 points, 2 points behind RSL, got the home playoff game, finished up 16-9-9. practically identical home and away, and that's what you need to have that kind of success to finish fourth. Where do you see Seattle in the mix this year? I know a lot of folks are high. The TV folks, when they gave their poll, they were really high on Minnesota for some reason. Seattle, I think they had at number 2. I think they had LAFC at number 1. LAG was 3 because of the injury specifically to Paintsel and to Ricky Puig. How do you see the rest of the Western Conference falling out here in 24 and Seattle's place in it?
I have Seattle as a safe number 2 in the West. I really think that they have proven that the team is extremely deep, that there's a lot of talented players that can hit the floor running right off the bat. There were some growing pains and some rust in that first game in Antigua, but I feel like that's going to help them even more when it comes to Charlotte. They've already have a little bit of tape on the things that we should not do and the things that we should do, where we can exploit teams, where we have to be real careful. So because of that, I guess Seattle was a solid 2. This roster, I do expect them to go get somebody in the summer. Everything to me says that Seattle's going to take the domestic tournament the most serious. I think that that's where we're going to put a lot of their effort. And because of that, I got him at second. I know people are in love with LAFC. I'm not, man. I'm so skeptical about a team that had so many departures. This is unlike anything that we've seen with LAFC. People were telling me, yeah, well, Chicho left and you were able to replace him. And, Cifuentes was gone. You were able to replace him. But man, this time around, now that Kike has gone as well to Gremio, I mean, man, this whole team is brand new. And look, I love La Joya Martinez, and I think he's a really good player. But I don't know if he's going to give you Bogut's numbers or Oliveira numbers. So I've talked enough about Jesus Murillo, his importance for LAFC. So I do not have him. I have him in my top 5, but not top 2. I got the Galaxy. Regardless of injuries, regardless of issues, I have the Galaxy number 1. And here's why. I think Greg Vanney has really put together a curriculum, a soccer module, a way to really exploit the best parts of his teams. And there's still a lot of quality there, man. I mean, how many teams can say, yes, we're going to wait on Ricky, but we got Marcus Royce filling in, right? And Paintsel 6 to 8 weeks, that was a while ago. He might miss, I don't know, 3 games, 4 games at the most from MLS play. So it's not like he has a really long time to be off. He's a quality guy. I love the guys that they brought on in terms of Sanabria. They just picked up Don Nacimientos. I mean, they have so many players there that I feel like they're going to be just fine. Plus the Greg Vanney component, plus a defensive line that I think has some continuity, that did get better, that I think will be solid. I have LA Galaxy at number 1.
What about, and I've got 2 teams in my mind, and so what I'll do is I'll stick to California and then come up to Cascadia. What do you think San Jose is going to be like this year, other than a fun watch, either for the train wreck factor or for the fact that they're probably going to score 7.5 goals a match? What do you think about San Jose?
San Jose is interesting, and I have a lot of respect for Bruce and his ability to raise the floor of any team that he gets into. Love the attacking end of that team. Lots of options, lots of quality. Concerns are defensively, but I feel like Bruce is going to be able to fix those. So right now I have them mid-table and fighting a spot into the playoffs. Again, I haven't done my rankings, but I was trying to figure out if in the West specifically, they were between the 8th and 7th place, so I was trying to figure out where they could get there. But I have a lot of belief in this squad. Love Hernan Lopez. I think that he wants to make a name for himself here in MLS. I feel like he has Europe in his radar, and he knows that he has to perform at a Ricky-like level for him to get there. So because of all those things, I trust Chicho. You've heard me talk about him in his first year is always where he's at his best. You got Pellegrino, you got Espinosa. I mean, that's a quality team, midfield up.
You got Joseph
We'll see
Martinez.
what happens with the defense.
Yeah.
How you gonna get there? But I feel like they have enough to be 8th place in the West.
Yep, Joseph Martinez hanging out up top as well. So it's going to be. I've always maintained so far with San Jose that you only have one soccer ball, and that might be a problem at some point. because
Right.
there's going to be a lot of folks that are going to want to possess it and put it in the back of the net. Um, I was, and I when we were going through we were kind of doing our power rankings earlier in the week, and I looked at the West and I thought, okay, I think there are 3 tiers here, and I think that if you look at say 10 through 15, I could agree. So 10 through 15, I think is 1 tier, and that San Diego, Vancouver, I think Dallas will be better. I think I mean, I'm going off of what the pundits said on Apple when they did their composite. They said Dallas was 13th. I think they're sleeping on Dallas. I think Dallas is going to be higher. I don't think that they're going to be 13th by any stretch of the imagination. Sporting, they have at 12. They have all caps St. Louis City SC at 11, and they've got Portland at 10. I could see that as that tier, that bottom tier, 10 to 15. The order might be a little different, but I think that that's pretty close to that bottom tier and who should be in it.
Yeah, I'm with you on Dallas. I think that they have enough talent right now to get into those top 10 teams.
Yeah.
I feel like Portland is being overrated a little bit. They had some serious question marks in the defensive end. We've talked about Evander, the big hole that he leaves in Portland. So I really don't have Portland making the playoffs, and I have them right off the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm with you when it comes to those tiers. I think that those can shift and move. But Dallas is probably a team that with Lucho Acosta, with some of the things that Peter Musa could do for you, one of the better strikers in the Western Conference. I think that there's enough there where they can really work themselves into those top 10 teams.
Second tier, kind of 4 through 9, because we figured that top tier is going to be some combination of LAG, LAFC, and Seattle. So I figured that top 3 is your top tier. Then that middle tier, 4 through 9, some combination of Minnesota, RSL, Austin, San Jose, Houston, and Colorado. That's the middle tier that the folks that do the TV, the fancy TV stuff, that's who they had in that middle tier. Can Minnesota repeat? Can RSL find offense? Austin, first year under a new coach, and obviously you're dropping a lot of money on some DPs. San Jose, we talked about them. We had Glenn Davis on to talk about Houston and the questions that are there with the replacement. You bring in Jack McGlynn to help things out. You bring in Nicolas Lodeiro to help things out. And then Colorado at 9. So that middle tier, I think, could have some sway in it as well.
Look, I hate to say this, but RSL has really just lost everything that they had done and kind of piqued my interest last season.
Yeah.
I just watched that game against Herediano, and Herediano was so much better. And RSL's offense was anemic, and it was slow, and it was out of sync, and they had no flair, no deep threats. I mean, it was tough to see RSL, man. So out of those that you just mentioned, man, they're the ones that I'm least highest on. I like what Minnesota can do. I think that they have the to me, I have the most expectation out of those teams that you just kind of put there because of the consistency that Ramsey has with that team. I thought he was brilliant last season on the way he moved certain players. Rosales, where he played them, Hawane, where he played them, the way he used those substitution patterns. I think Jaboa is a monster, and I think Jaboa is going to be fighting for Golden Boot this season. Top 5. I mean, the kid can ball. Now with a full preseason, now ready to go right off the bat. Now with some more chemistry, I think that Minnesota is a team to watch. So I definitely high him at the higher spectrum of there. Houston, like what they did with Nicolas Lodeiro. You saw me break this, and I think that the best and the most interesting part of the Niko deal is that they get him on a minimum salary because he was bought out by Orlando. So he kind of gives you some room to have a experienced guy that can play the cam, that can give you some productivity. I mean, look, Nicolas Lodeiro at 30 plus years old, 34, he had played over 1,700 minutes for Orlando, had 13 assists in all competitions. I mean, the guy can still play. So you could keep Niko right now while you go look for your DP10 and you go look for all of those replacements because you did lose Coco Carrasquilla. Obviously, you lose Mikael, which is a big hole in your defensive line. I mean, Mikael was. I had him in my defender of the year ballot, I think at number 3. So he'd been that good. So now you got to fill that position, which is not going to be easy. So there is some work that Houston has to do. But overall, I like where they're going. I see where they're going. And they have enough pieces right now to kind of hold their weight until those acquisitions come in.
But you also mentioned over at Sounder at Heart that Seattle had a chance to bring him back, and they turned that idea down.
They did. They absolutely did. Thank you for bringing that up. We did have that article go yesterday morning. And yes, I mean, sources tell me that Nicolas Lodeiro had a deep desire to finish his MLS career in Seattle. Look, it's no secret that Nico's at the end of his career, and he'll likely finish that career at Nacional back in Uruguay with his family. But there was a time that Niko wanted to stay in Seattle and wanted to retire in Seattle, wanted to become a coach in Seattle and help develop kids in the academy and do all of these things for the club. But after, for lack of a better word, he was rejected by the club that he put on the map, by the club that he gave 2 MLS titles and a Champions League title. I just don't see him even coming back for the 1-day contract. You know, fans were like, oh, it's all right. He'll come back for the 1-day contract. I don't even know if that's possible, man. I would feel, and I haven't talked to Niko, but I would feel awful and like a big slap in the face when I gave everything for this squad. And now that I can come back, help your team, because I'm still a quality player. I could be a rotational player. I could do whatever just so I could retire with your team. And even though the commitment on my salary was bare minimum, you still didn't want me back. That's a tough pill to swallow, man. So, yes, Seattle definitely passed on that possibility. It was way before the Houston deal. Now he's happy in Houston. He feels you could tell how much that team feels like he could provide of everything that we've read about Houston and what they said about Niko. But man, I was surprised that Seattle passed on that deal, specifically knowing that they moved Josh Atencio, specifically knowing that there is a lot of competitions, and if there is an injury to Christian Roldan, to a JP, having a guy like Niko would be unbelievable because he could play that holding mid. He could play a little bit higher. He's got versatility. He's still got wheels for his age. I mean, man, I just thought that would have been a no-brainer.
Last question for you before we let you finish your cup of coffee. Some of the folks in the Twitch pitch are wondering if Neville is on the hot seat in Portland, considering the ins and the outs and the not matching of the ins and the outs.
He better be. I mean, Neville got his bags packed, and if it's not because the seat is hot, is because he's got his job applications on LinkedIn, just moving around the world. I mean, the dude just seems to clearly be using Portland as a stepping stone to another position. So yes, he's definitely in the hot seat. I felt like last season with that roster, he should have done so much more. And defensively, they were atrocious. They were awful, dead awful. I don't know if they've done enough this offseason to correct those things. And now you go into a season where all of the teams around you have revamped, have reloaded. You got some new pieces yourself. But if you don't get to the playoffs and if you don't start off to a really good season, I could see Portland starting to just raise that heat up, turn up, the heat a little bit, and maybe he goes on his own. Maybe there's a movement, but I do feel like he has a lot to prove this season, and his seat starts off pretty hot.
Jamie Watson in the bullpen, he's going to be coming up right after you. So what do folks need to know? Where are you? What are you doing? How do folks see what you're doing, especially Sounder at Heart and Pulso? What's going on?
Well, tomorrow we'll have, as usual, the podcast with Jeremiah Oshan, that maybe not as creatively as other titles for shows. This one's called What We Learned This Week, but we do it every Friday. And we're going to be going over the Antigua game. We're going to tell you what we see in practice Friday, because we are going to be at Lumen Field, where there's going to be a little bit of a press day. We pick up our credentials. We're going to have some interviews with, of course, Brian and some of the players. Really interested about what Brian's got to say on that game. We'll see what happens with those lineups coming up to Charlotte. So if you want to get a deep insight on what's going on with Seattle, make sure that you check out the Sandra Hart podcast, What We Learned This Week. And then on Monday, we'll be breaking down Charlotte game, whatever happened, in Loving Scorchers podcast through the Sounder Heart Podcast Network as well. And that'll be at 8 a.m. Pacific on Monday. So that's our kickoff. That's our Love and Scorchers kickoff with Ari Lillenwald.
Wow. That's an early wake-up call, even for me. As always, my friend, great to see you, and we will catch up with you when games have meant something next Thursday, last half hour of the normal show. Love you, my friend. Be safe. We'll see you next week.
Appreciate it, my guy. You stay easy, man. And I'm high in Atlanta, baby. I still don't know where I'm putting them in the East, but they're top three for me.
No doubt about it. You are not alone. We'll catch up with you next week.
All right.
There goes Niko.